Hello, team, and welcome to episode 32. Have you ever seen the games? And yes, I'm going to be taking advantage of this event that happens every 4 years, the Olympics, to get into a topic that my students hate, the present perfect. And it's something that, at least for me, as an American, I never thought about when I was growing up. I knew how to use my haves, but it's something that I never actually had to think about until I taught English. And for my Brazilian students, it can be quite a problem. It's something that doesn't always fit. And the problem doesn't usually come when they're seeing something in English, they're able to understand this. The problem comes when they're trying to go from Portuguese to English and have poof kind of disappears. And the good news is that many native speakers speak quite incorrectly. Go to the middle of the United States, you will not find the best English. But my goal for you, as one of my English students, is to speak better than the average native speaker. It's the same way that here in Brazil, if you go to the downtown Belo Horizonte, I don't know, Praça Sete, and start talking to people on the street, every single person you speak to will say something incorrectly in Portuguese. And that's fine. There's a place for this. You're having a beer with your friends. You're not supposed to be speaking that perfect professional business master Barack Obama style English. But when the opportunity arises where you are trying to show your best version in English, I would like you to be able to. And I think these halves, they go a long way to show your English mastery. So let's take a quick look. And the general theme will be the Olympics. I think it's just good for memory to have a theme to tie into our grammar point. And I'm starting with a meme, and this is absolutely true. I'm not really an Olympics guy. We tried to watch some of the Olympics because of Lise, but realistically, it's not really my thing. But I would love to watch some random people competing in these events. So that I think would be an excellent addition, like a pre-Olympics where we see Dale, the 39-year-old electrician doing some gymnastics and stuff. But warm-up content. They asked the U.S. men's basketball team, what's the scariest Olympic sport? How about you? What do you think the scariest Olympic sport would be? I'm not a biker, so anything bicycle related, I'm not going to be doing too well. But I think the pole vault, worst situation, you go and you fall on your face, maybe the stick goes in your eye. But, the other version, you end up in successfully vaulting into the air and then you're falling from up high. So I don't think there's a good version of this. And what made up Olympic sport would you be the goat at? Maybe making English PDFs. That would be my skill. But who knows? How about you? What made up Olympic sport would you like to participate in? So I've divided this into little English snacks. I think it's easier for my students to digest. And I framed it as 3 different questions, starting with, have you ever? You see a question like this, and it's usually my students' first exposure to the present perfect. They're talking about before now in your life. Have you ever been to China? Have you ever watched The Sopranos? Have you ever played water polo? And I guess you can switch the word ever for before. Have you played water polo before? That is fine. I just don't recommend both because it sounds redundant. Have you ever done something before? If you've ever done it, it was before. But with both of these examples, we're talking about actions that happened at an undefined time before the present. The only information you can have is that it happened before now. If I say when I was younger, doesn't count, no more haves. And I think when is a good reference for this. If you hear the word when, you should not have the word have. Unless you're asking a question, but that's exception, that's different. But if you say, I have done this, when, poof, wrong. There should be no have in that sentence. And I always like to bring some keywords. So I think ever and before in your life, before this point, they are good references that there should be triggers that maybe you need to have in that sentence. And we also have always and never. So have you always liked your personal soccer team? Um, Things that happened since you were born, since you can remember, it's a good reference that there should be a have in there. Never, same thing. You can use ever in the negative. I haven't ever been to China. You can use it even in the affirmative. This is the best pizza ever, but I don't really recommend it. In the negatives, because we just have never, it's cleaner. And in the affirmative, it sounds kind of high schooly. Doesn't really sound that great. But I guess you can use it if you're exaggerating, if you're having some fun. Also, when we talk about the amount of times you've done something, it is common for us to not say when this happened. If I tell you, I've been to Europe, you don't know when. If I tell you, I've been to Europe twice, still don't know when. So when we talk about an amount of times, I've watched this 40 times. I've played this many, many times. It's common for you to have that subtle I've, you've, she's. So, and guys, this I think is the perfect class for you to turn on those subtitles. Usually I'm not a subtitle fan, but sometimes they can be subtle. The she's can be she is, it can be she has. So when you have the subtitles, it's like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme. Oh, there's the have. So this would be an excellent week for you to pick something fun to watch with English subtitles. What sport have you always admired? I've always admired gymnastics. It doesn't seem human what those people do. Very, very distant from my abilities. And what are 3 sports you have played before? I have played water polo. I have swum on a team. I've played some soccer just for fun. But watch this. I've played water polo. When I was in school, I was on the team. As soon as I defined when something happened, when I was in school, the have disappears. When I was in school, I played water polo. No have. Part 2, we're going to be talking about have you been watching? And I will explain it first the way that goes into my student's brain easier. And then secondly, I will explain the way I hear native speakers do this more. And we have the have or the has, the trigger for the present perfect. Been. It'll always be there with the verb in the ing form. Remembering S if you're gossiping about somebody. If I talk about he, she, it, João, Maria, but just one person, you need that has. Now, the been, you need the past participle form. Or as Breno says, the third one, because of those columns with the regular verbs. But have and has, they require past participle. Verb in the ing form requires to be. You have that fusion right in the middle. Been. This is good news. You do not need to think about this. And when do we use this? When something that started in the past extends until now and keeps going. So we will use this for, if you're talking about a duration of time, I have lived here for this amount of time. I will explain this right now, why I said I have lived instead of I have been living. But I have been teaching English since X year. All of these examples, you should have a have. Now, when I teach this to my students, I like to teach this form first. I have been swimming since I was young. It just enters the Brazilian mind easier. So something started in the past, keeps going. Makes sense. Now, native speakers will often not do this. If I were to say, I have taught English for over 10 years, fine. Maybe I went to Thailand when I was younger and I taught there for 10 years and this is not true now. But the way most native speakers do this is to say that something started in the past and extends until now. The difference between I have taught English for 10 years and I have been teaching English for 10 years, the differences are subtle. Number one, I have been teaching. I'm guaranteeing I will continue to be an English teacher. That's one. Number two, the ing form focuses on the action. I have taught English for 10 years. Cool, I understand. I have been teaching English for 10 years. You imagine me in front of the camera, writing some to be's on the board, the action in progress. And the third subtle difference is that if you have a verb that does not have an action, a state verb, you cannot put it in the ing form. And the most common example of this would be know. I can't say I have been knowing Patricia for X amount of years. I have to say, I have known. Because unless every morning we wake up and I say, hi, I'm John. She says, hi, I'm Patricia. There's no action involved. And I think that's no is the big one. Even like, because of social media. In the past, like was not an action verb. Nowadays, it's normal. I've been liking this. I haven't been liking it, but it is recent addition. It is a recent addition to English. One that you won't see is I have been being. You just will not hear this. So if you have a state verb, you cannot use the ing form. All right. So let's take a look at some keywords, some triggers that can help you to know you should include a have. Been. Been is, it just does so much work. It's carrying the English language on its back. Be in Portuguese can be ser, can be está. But if you look at how we use to go in Portuguese, been can also be to go. Have you been to China? In Portuguese, we would say, você já foi para a China. Well, we have this distinct difference in English where been, you went, you left. While gone, you're still there. And team, a lot of people just mix them all up. So be aware that many people do not know this rule. I think for and since are good triggers that you should be including a have. You're not talking about the present. You're not talking about the past. I have taught for this amount of time. I have been living in Brazil since this date. Also, recently. I have recently been watching the Olympics, and I am currently watching the Olympics. Just make sure you match your time expressions with the correct time. Recently, before now, you need the have. Currently, now, you should not have a have. And they're both fine. I am currently reading Essentialism. The attention is now, is here on the now. And I have been reading Essentialism. The attention is a little bit before now, but they're both fine. Just match your time expressions. So I just mentioned this. Have you been? You went, you left. Have you gone? You're still in Paris or going to Paris. The big exception, I would say, would be for activities. How? Have you gone fishing? Doesn't mean you're there fishing now. It's have you gone fishing before? Have you gone scuba diving? Have you gone skydiving? So it's common to use go with an activity and not mean that you've gone fishing for the rest of your life. Theme, next up, a little detail, have got to. And this is cool. I learned this week. I had no idea. I've used have got to my whole life, and I thought we just were using extra words. There was no reason for this got. Because I have got to study more and I have to study more. It seemed pretty similar. But there is actually a difference with have got to implying an external pressure. I have got to study more or else my mom is going to whack me in the head if I don't pass this test. Or I've got to deliver this report by Friday. If not, my boss will fire me. And it doesn't need to be an actual person. Maybe it can be your whatever it is that you feel is pressuring you into do something that includes that got. Realistically, most people use this without thinking. But what I don't want you to confuse this with is have gotten, which is the present perfect. The gotten is the past participle of to get. So, like here, Laura has gotten better at tennis in the past. I have got to practice more. I have got to practice more now, and hopefully I will practice more in the future. It is not the present perfect. And I've never been to England to test this out, but I've also heard that if I'm going to ask, like in English, American English, we would say, do you have a ball? While in British English, we would say, have you got a ball? It seems normal to me. It's just something I'm not familiar with. And what has Brazil got to do to win get more gold medals at the next Olympics? I think they need to invest more or have more incentives in school. I would say most athletes are formed, at least the Olympic athletes are formed at a pretty young age. So they need to start with the investments early. And have you just? Last point, number 3. This last one, I would say, is a tool, not a rule. What do I mean by this? While people do ignore the rules, the ones we saw earlier, have you been watching recently? These are either correct or incorrect. Now, with this, It's an option. And what we can do is turn the past, almost bring it into the present with a have. And what do I mean by this? So if I say, I lost my green ball, done. It's disappeared. I need to go to the store and I get a new one. But if I say I've lost my green ball, doesn't matter when I lost it. It means that I'm still looking for it. It's still affecting the present. And where do I think this is relevant? I guess I could see this in work meetings. So maybe you did a report on Monday, but the weekly meeting is on Friday. And you can say, oh, I've checked the report. I finished the report. And what you're doing is you're saying this is new information. This is relevant now. So you can use have. I see this a lot in a more professional. I don't really believe in business English. I believe in expressing ourselves professionally. And I do see this in the professional environment, more of these haves. And what you're saying is this is relevant now. So you can do this. Just, I think, is a good trigger. I've just finished. Okay, what's next? And already and yet, I think they are cool. Sometimes I'll hear my students mix some of these up. But let's say I expect you to finish the report. And then I ask you, have you finished? You have two options. Yes, I have already finished. And I haven't finished yet. They both have to do with the expectation. Already it was met, yet it hasn't been met, but it will. And so far, if you have progress, maybe that same report. So far, I have finished 2 pages, but there are 2 pages left. So you do have so far as a middle ground between the already and yet. What sport has been missing from the Olympics? There is a correct answer to this, and I recommend you click on this link to be returned to the Stockholm Olympics of very early 1900, maybe 1906 or something. And there should be tug of war in the Olympics. It is awesome. I would love to see 10 giants pulling on a rope. Team, thank you. That is it. I do not expect you to mentally download this information into your brain, but like I always tell my students, wherever you are, I would like you to take one step forward. So that's your goal. And I think it's a good week for you to turn on those English subtitles and hunt those haves. Thank you very much, and I will see you in class.